So you're vibe coding, or maybe you're doing some AI assisted development and you want to figure out which is the best tool to use. So I usually build out apps and prototypes using Cursor on this channel, but Claude Code has piqued my interest over the last couple of months because it's gaining a lot more traction and it's becoming more and more mature as a development tool. So in this video, I'm going to give you a beginner's introduction to Claude Code, how I use it alongside Cursor, what are its strengths and weaknesses, when I would use Cursor over Claude and vice versa, and I'm going to share my opinionated favorite without sitting on the fence. Not only am I going to show you how to use Claude Code, we're actually going to build a functioning micro SaaS that you could actually use in your own business or sell on to somebody else. So with the app that we're going to create, I'm going to be able to drop in an invoice. It's going to be uploaded to OpenAI to be processed. OpenAI is going to parse the image and extract all the relevant information into a format that's usable that I can then connect into QuickBooks or Xero to reconcile my invoices. Sell this as a micro SaaS and have a nice little recurring revenue stream for yourself. So hopefully you find my lessons useful. If you want to go deeper on this topic, there's a huge course in there which takes you all the way from beginner to advanced in terms of launching your own AI application with all the principles that I talk about in my videos. So in order to get set up, we just go to Anthropic Claude Code. And you're going to need to have Node.js installed, version 18 or up. So just type in node-v and you'll get your version number. And I'm on version 22, so I'm good. Then you want to copy this little command here, npm install general anthropics, and we can just paste that command in. I'm just going to hit return. Now we can just type in Claude and hit return, and it should give you this welcome screen. You can just pick dark mode. So you have two different options here. You can go with the Anthropic console using API usage billing, or you can go with a subscription account. So if you're using the console, it's bill per request and it gets pretty expensive quickly. So I generally don't recommend that. You can rack up a lot of costs pretty quick. At minimum, go for the $20 Pro tier, which gives you access to Sonnet 4, Claude Sonnet 4, which is basically your workhorse model, the one that you're going to use for the majority of implementation. Now, you don't get access to Opus, which is a slightly higher rated model than Claude Sonnet on the Pro tier. You only get that access at the $100 tier. And with that, you get access to Opus up to a certain point before you get rate limited and it switches down to Claude Sonnet. Personally, everybody talks a lot about Opus being, a game changer. I don't feel like I'm seeing a huge difference when I use Opus over Sonnet or even against Gemini, which would be a cheaper setup. So I'm kind of happy enough to be on the $20 Pro pricing for now. But I'm going to do some more testing and see if Opus really wins out or where it wins out. Maybe it works better, larger code bases or in autonomous actions. So I'm going to click the subscription mode here and I can just hit enter. I'm going to accept the default here. And again, we need to accept the trust of the folder. So two different commands here that are helpful. You can switch between plan mode and regular mode by just hitting Shift Tab. I can hit question mark to give me a list of common commands. And then if I hit slash, I can get more commands as well that I can run and run down through the list. So I'm just going to quit out of the terminal for now. So I'm just going to create a new folder on my hard drive. Usually I open this up in a development folder somewhere on my machine. So let's just create an empty folder. And then from Cursor, I'm going to open that folder. So in Cursor, I'm going to open a new terminal window. So just go up to the menu, type in new terminal. And important to note that you can see up here that the root of our folder is that folder that we opened. So I've called it invoice bot 1. So in here, we're just going to type in Claude. And that should kick it off. Do I want to trust this folder? Yes. And we're all set up. Now, usually when I'm in Cursor, I'll be using my chat window here and I'll basically tell it to create a new Nextjs application. Now, trying that here in Claude, it doesn't work as well, because what Claude will do is it creates a set of files in the root directory that it uses for configuration before it starts to do anything else. And when you're installing Nextjs, it will give an error if it tries to install in a folder that already has anything in there. So the workaround is just to open up a new terminal and just run the setup for Nextjs yourself. It's just one line, so it's easy to do. So npx create next app latest, and this little dot tells it to install in this particular folder, and just hit return, and then we'll follow through on the defaults. Now you'll see everything is installed here in our file directory on the left hand side, and if I want to test this out, I just hit npm run dev and will give me a little development server that we can start working on, and that will open on localhost 3000. So if I command click on that, it should open up my browser here, and we've got our little Nextjs app ready to go. Perfect. So a useful command when you're stepping into a new code base with Claude is just type /init. So type /init, and this will initialize a new Claude markdown file with codebase documentation. So essentially what this will do is scan through your existing code base and create a review or a markdown file for it, which is useful for it when it starts to interact with your project on an ongoing basis. So we can already see here how Claude is working. It's got access to multiple different tools in the same way that Cursor or any other agent would. It's able to list files, read files, create files, write to files, and search using different grep patterns as well. Doing all this to understand your code base. And you can see up here now we have a difference view created. So we have this file that's created, and then everything in green here is what's been added in. So this is giving us a quick overview of our project. So as a default, Claude is going to ask your permission to run any of the tools. So in this case, it says, do you want me to make this edit to the file? So I have options here. I can click yes, and don't ask me again in this session, or I want to do something differently. So when you're starting out, I recommend you don't go into auto accept mode. It's a good idea just to understand what's happening at each stage. As you get more proficient and more comfortable, you can switch on the auto accept mode, which just moves a whole lot faster. But that can also get you into trouble as well. It'll go off in directions that you didn't anticipate. So we have the same thing in Cursor. It used to be called the YOLO mode, or you only live once, but now it has different rules for accepting whatever kind of commands that are going to be run. So you have a choice at a granular level to select what commands do get run, what are okay, and what should never be allowed to be run automatically. So I'm just going to go yes here for now. So no matter what project I'm working on, I'm always going to have a quick chat at the start with a product manager agent. And when I mean agent, basically it's just a simple prompt that I have created and use on most projects to give a starting point for my developer agent. I'll leave a link in the description to these prompts, but for now I'm just going to run this. So you'll see I've just created this folder here, docs, agents, and I've got my product manager markdown prompt here. And in Claude, as it's connected to the IDE, you'll see that I have a reference to the current file that's open. You're in the product manager.mde. And if you just want to check your IDE setup, you can just type in /IDE, hit return, and you can see that it's selected as cursor at the moment. So with my cursor in here, you'll see that it's now referencing this particular file with Claude. So I can say, run this prompt. So you can see the response here. Please explain your project to me. What product or application are you looking to build? And so I'm just going to give it my idea for what it is that I want to build. And I'm just going to use some voice dictation using Whisperflow to do that. So I've got my prompt pasted in there. You can pause it if you want to take a look, and I'm just going to hit return. So it's given me a list of questions, and typically they're numbered. So I'll just answer them with short answers like this. Cool, so it's given me my elevator pitch, my primary users, my characteristics, my functional requirements, all the different headers that I need just to get started, including user stories. And as per my prompt, it's gone and created an output docs folder, and it's given me that PRD that we can reference going forward. Now, by typing the @ symbol, I can reference any file that I want. So I've typed in @ here, and PR has given me the actual file that I want. So if I hit return, it's given me the full context. It's given me the full file. Now, this is a nice feature of Claude Code that was released recently. I can switch into plan mode. So if you type Shift and Tab, you can switch into plan mode, and I've got my attached PRD. So I'm just going to hit return. So I have the option here of accepting this plan, or I can click no and keep planning. So let's just click that. So I'm just saying here for the MVP, let's keep things simple. So this is something important as you're developing with AI. So what we're going to do here, instead of building out the whole app with one shot, we're going to break it down into smaller sections, into an MVP. We want to see if we can just get the main functionality working so that we can just test it out with a couple of users. And we don't necessarily need to have a database attached at this point. So you can see here it's come back with a more refined plan based on my feedback. So you could go again to refine it further, but I think this is kind of enough for the MVP. So as you start out, best to keep it simple so you're understanding everything that you're working through. So I'm just going to accept this plan. So you can see here that Claude keeps a to-do list scratch pad. So basically it's got an updated list of to-dos that it will actually start to work through. You'll note, or you'll have heard of maybe other tools like Taskmaster, or Windsurf now has a planning mode where it has a mixture of two different models, which will do long-term planning and short-term planning around your task list. To be honest, how I normally handle it in Cursor is I just have a rules file that I attach that says, create a task list if it doesn't exist, and update that task list as we proceed to our planning stages. It doesn't need to be any more complicated than that. So it is nice to see it baked in directly into Claude Code. So it's asking me, do I want to install the OpenAI SDK? So I'm just going to go ahead. So it's talking us through the process here. It's gone and created a .env local file and put in a sample placeholder for our OpenAI API key. So while that is working away there, let's go and get our OpenAI key. So you need to go to platform.openai and go to dashboard, and then go down to your OpenAI API keys. We're going to create a new secret key, and then we're just going to copy this key and we're going to paste it in. So I've pasted in my API key there, and it's important to keep that secret. I'll be deleting this, of course, before I put the video live. Or will I actually remember to do that? Who knows? Maybe go test it. Now you can see it's stepped through and created a couple of different files. So if you look at in the left hand side here, you'll see that anything marked in blue here is a modified file, and anything with a U is basically it's untracked or it's brand new. So this is a useful way of seeing, what the model is adding. So it's created an API route and two different endpoints, one to parse, one to upload. It's got a file upload component, and then there is a library directory and utility for working with OpenAI. Now you'll see here it's giving me a difference view. It's showing me what's being removed and what's being added as it makes its way through the files. And so that's great, but I find that Cursor just has a better way of allowing me to review and check through the changes. What I can do here though, as it's integrated with Cursor, is I can just command click on any of these files and open them up in the browser above, and then I can basically look through the file to see if there's anything that I want to change. What I like to do quite a bit with Cursor, and this is something that's missing from Claude, I guess, is I might decide I want to highlight a certain piece of the code like this, and to get a further explanation of how this works, just so I'm learning as I progress. So it's asking me to run lint, and lint is just basically a way of checking the code quality, and that's something I'm happy for it to always run on its own. So I'm just going to say yes, and don't ask me to run that again. So you'll notice when you do that, a new folder appears up here with your Claude configurations, and you're seeing here what you have given permissions to allow. Okay, so it's gone and fixed all those errors, and it's asking me, can it run the development server? Typically, I don't want it to run the development server. I want to do that myself. So I'm just going to say no, and I'm going to run that separately. So I'm just going to go over here to Node, and then I already have it running from earlier on. So let's just restart it to be sure, because we've done a lot of changes. So I just type in npm run dev to run the development server. And then if we command click on our localhost 3000, it'll bring us to our local Nextjs version. Here we have our invoice extractor. Let's see if it works. So I'm going to upload a invoice from Notion, telling me it's processing the invoice, and we got an error, failed to parse the invoice. That is to be expected. Let's see what the error might be. So there's two ways you can check your errors. You can go to Command-Alt-I and get your browser console information just to see what pops up there. And so we were given an internal server response error on the parse, and so we'll probably get more information on that within our terminal itself. So if we look here, now your development server terminal holds the key to most of the problems you're going to encounter. So basically you can just scroll through the trace errors and basically pick out the part that you want. Usually that starts at the point where you see error. So we can just copy that and pull down everything to this point, and then we can copy this. Usually what I do in Cursor is I just click add to chat, but because we're using Claude, I can just Control C or Command C to copy that. Let's pop back over to Claude, and then I'm just going to paste in that information, and I'm going to add a prompt. Usually if it's a small error, I'll just type in something like fix or change or something like that. But when it's a more detailed error that I really haven't a clue what's going on, I want to get the AI to diagnose the error first and give me a couple of options to solve it. So this does two things. Number one, it educates me on what the problem is. So I'm learning something, and I'm moving forward to help the model itself, because oftentimes I'll need to go and search for something or do some kind of an independent research to help solve the problem. So I often just say diagnose the error and don't jump into implementation. So because we're dealing with a API and parsing setup, I'm not exactly sure or confident that using the Claude 4 model that it's got the up-to-date knowledge about that API. So basically it's using what it's crawled from a couple of months ago as its reference. So we want to use the search capability to kind of back up its findings. So I'm telling it, can you search the web to back up your research? Because Claude Code has search built in, the same way that Cursor or Windsurf or other tools have as well. So based on the search, Claude is still pretty happy with its first option, so we're going to go ahead with that, option 1. So let's just hit 1 and return here. So it's giving me a list of changes that it applied and a confidence rating that the app will run. I've seen this before, so let's see how it goes. So I'm instantly getting a Webpack error, so I just need to restart my server. Okay, so let's test out our invoice extractor. I'm going to drop in a invoice from Notion. It's going to process that invoice. It's sending it to the OpenAI file storage. Then it's making a call to the image API to extract all the information from it. And this is spot on. It's got all the vendor information, invoice details, etc., financial summary, and that is the correct amount. So this is such a big time saver. I've got so many invoices that come into my account that I need to reconcile against my bank account, and I need to extract all the information like tax, exactly what the totals were so that they match. And some software will actually do this for you, like Xero, but it will do it in a haphazard way, or it will only try and do extractions based on text parsing. And this is something you could easily use in your own company to save you a ton of time, or actually package as a product and sell on to other companies. So if you'd like to see the full process for building out this app, I'm going to cover it in my community at switchdimension.com. The link is in the description. Another useful thing in Claude Code is adding memories. So let's say you like to build your components in a certain way, or you'd like to have the model remind you to commit constantly. You can create that memory by typing hash and then just giving it a descriptive name. Now, the reason you want to use a descriptive name is that the model will have context to know when to call that. And you can also view all your memories by typing slash and then memory, and then you can edit the Claude memory files. What would Claude Code be without MCPs? Of course, Anthropic invented the MCP, so you can also add in your MCP servers. If I type /MCP, you can manage MCP servers. So I'm just going to hit return, and it's saying we've no MCP servers configured. So I need to step outside of Claude in order to configure my MCPs into the terminal. So I'm just going to create a new terminal here, and we're going to type in Claude MCP and hit return. So there's a couple of ways to quickly add an MCP. You've got the ability to type in Claude MCP add, and then I would type in the commands for the MCP that I want to add. So it would be npx, the name of the server, and any other commands that might go with it. A far simpler way to do it is just to add the MCPs to your Claude desktop setup. You can type in Claude MCP add from Claude desktop and just run that command, and it's going to give you a list of the MCPs that you've already got set up with Claude desktop. So I've got context 7 there, Agentic Desktop Commander. So I'm actually going to hit space to switch off these ones, Desktop Commander for now, and then we can add in the rest of those by just hitting return. And so if I go back again to my project over here, and if I type /MCP, I'm still not getting any servers in there as well. So I'm just going to exit out. So I'm just going to type in exit. So I would just type Claude-C to continue again, and then it's saying no MCP servers configured, and I just type in MCP again and see what it gets. Yeah, and because we've restarted the terminal instance, we can now see them all connected. Out of interest, these are some great MCPs at the moment. Browser MCP allows Claude Code or Cursor to go and check on the actual app itself to see if it's running okay, or to take screenshots. And Context 7 goes and searches all the recent documentation for whatever you're trying to install or set up. So now Claude will have access to those. And how I would invoke that is I would basically say, use the browser MCP to check the console logs, or use Context 7 to find the most recent documentation. Some other helpful commands: if you just type $, you'll get some of the useful other commands that I might not have mentioned. So we've covered /, we've covered the @ for the file path, for context, we've covered memorization. If it's working through a particular problem and you don't like where it's going, just hit escape twice, so double tap it, and it will quit out of that particular run. Same thing you have in Cursor, you can hit stop or reject. You can set up auto accept of the edits. So you'll note as I went through, I made sure to accept each edit as it happened because I wanted to know exactly what was going on. You can click Shift Tab to auto accept those edits. And if you're typing a prompt and you want to get a new line, you just type Shift and return, and you'll get multiple new lines as you progress through a longer prompt. So you can also paste images from your clipboard directly into the CLI. So just copy whatever you have in terms of a screenshot, and instead of hitting Command V on a Mac, you need to hit Control V, or you can actually give reference to the actual file address and just hit return. And you can see here it successfully gave me feedback on what I pasted in. So Anthropic has some good documentation here on some common workflows that are well worth taking a look at, and they apply to any AI assisted development workflow. Some of the things I like are the fact that you can go and run Claude in non-interactive mode. So what we've been doing is interacting with Claude in the terminal in a conversational manner, but you can actually decide to run Claude independently on smaller tasks. And I would say it's only good for smaller tasks because, as you see, you need to work with the model on anything that's complex to help keep moving it along. If you've quit out of Claude at any point, I mentioned that you can use Claude Continue to pick up on the same session, or you can actually use Claude Resume and you'll get a conversation picker when you can decide, which conversation you want to pick up on. If you are a power user and you can't be bothered waiting the 30 seconds for the model to come back to you, you can actually decide to use something called work trees, which you can do this with any tool. Isn't exclusive to Claude, but it's a nice idea where you can have various different branches of your code base set up in a work tree. So I can actually check out independent branches to each instance of Claude. So technically I could have multiple Claude terminals open working on various different feature branches at the same time. I don't know if my brain can handle that, but it's an interesting idea as we move more towards agentic solutions to problems and having the agents work on multiple things at the same time. What is cool about Claude that sets it apart from a specific IDE like Cursor or Windsurf is its scriptability. Because it's running in the terminal and it's running as this session, it's got its own SDK, it's got its own ability to be scripted in whatever way you want to. So that opens up a whole new set of advanced use cases. So things that I really like about Claude is that it's really flexible. You can add it to any IDE because it exists in the terminal. So you could add it to JetBrains, Cursor, VS Code, whatever tool you want, or if you're a Vim user, you can actually just run it separately as well. So if you're a power user and you're comfortable being in the command line most of the time, I think it's actually a really good tool. The second thing is Anthropic do make the best models, or the ones that I use the most. I rely on Claude Sonnet series for most of the work I do. Previously it was 3.5, wasn't the biggest fan of 3.7. Claude 4 is an improvement, and it's the one that I used the most in terms of designing and developing software. If you're a Max user, you get a huge amount of usage, up to 20x depending on the plan that you're on, and you get unlimited access to Opus. Personally, I don't find a huge difference in using Opus over using Sonnet, but that's because most of the coding I do is in a interactive manner where I'm working with the model to make changes and to develop out software in a prototyping fashion. Perhaps if I was more agentic in how I worked, in that I set processes in place and let the agent work away, Opus might be a better choice, but I've tried that in multiple different occasions. I run independent agents working on tasks, and inevitably I feel like you still need a human in the loop to check on the work or to correct the model as it goes in different directions. So not the strongest use case for me. I really like that it's scriptable. So again, it's got its own SDK and its own little CLI. You can spin up multiple versions in multiple different terminals and have it working on different work trees with Git. So that potentially will be very powerful in the future, and it'll be interesting to see where the team take it. And I really like the built-in planning mode. It really just helps that it keeps a list of to-dos and it helps you work through those. But again, that's something I can easily do with a rules file in Cursor or Windsurf on my own, and have more control over how it works, because that can be quite opinionated to each individual person. So the pros of Cursor: it's a graphical interface. So it's an IDE where you can see all the buttons, where it's got different tabs. It's very much like VS Code. A lot of people will have learned how to program and develop using VS Code. So if you're a designer, a front-end designer, an entrepreneur that's just getting into vibe coding or AI assisted coding, I think the Cursor interface is just that little bit more friendly. Or you could also check out Windsurf as well. I like the fact that I don't have to go and learn a list of commands. If you're that kind of person who is more design orientated or isn't a full stack, constant day-to-day developer, you might not be that comfortable living in a terminal all the time. So the fact that I don't have to learn a list of commands is a bit of a bonus. I like the fact that Cursor has background agents now, which I can spin up and run in the background. I like that I've got file review. So as an agent develops out the code, I like in Cursor the way that I get the page review and the file review at a much granular level. You do get that in Claude, but it doesn't give you the ability to accept specific lines of code or reject them, and it doesn't give you as nice of an interface to be able to review the changes and accept them that are being made. So I think that's a plus for Cursor. And then the biggest thing, if I was to throw away all of those other features, is the fact that Cursor is model agnostic. So what does that mean? It means that I get to pick whatever model that I want to use. And there is a bit of a model war that goes on. There's different prices, there's different use cases, and I want to be able to pick the best model for the job. That being said, I do use Claude quite a bit, but I'd like to be able to use Gemini. I'd like to be able to use the OpenAI series. And with Cursor, I have the ability to select whatever model I want for the job. If I'm in Claude Code, I'm limited to using the Claude series. If I'm in Windsurf, I can only use the OpenAI series of models. So my biggest win for Cursor over everything is the fact that it is model agnostic and I can choose whatever model that I want. So in a nutshell, which one is right for you? I think if you want the full toolkit and access to every cutting edge LLM, go with Cursor. Probably more suited to vibe coders or AI assisted developers or people who are just getting into prototyping or starting their journey with developing applications, because it mimics how VS Code works on so many different levels. If you're more of an advanced developer, you like living in the terminal and you like the idea of scripting multiple different agents and having them running different processes, then Claude could be a good step for you, because on the various different max plans, you get a ton of usage for it to work through in the background if you're running multiple different agents. So personally, I think I'll be using Cursor for the bulk of my full stack development, especially the interactive stuff. But when it comes to spinning up agents or having background processes running, I'm going to continue to explore Claude, keep it open in the terminal and use it where it's best suited. So if you've been using Claude Code for a while, I would love to get your opinions on what your favorite features are and what the strongest use cases are for you. If you can add them down into the comments, I'll call them out and feature them in a future video.